I'm hearing some audio noise. I don't know what it is.
Hi, everyone. Welcome into our very first SEC Breakdown Show. This is Mark Rogers of Mark Rogers TV, and I am extremely excited to get this thing relaunched. We had our SEC Breakdown Show at various times on YouTube, on my channel on Mark Rogers TV, and we're getting started back here before the College Football National Championship game, and we've got quite a list of contributors here, starting with David Waters from Gator Sports previously, and also Last Word on Sports, covering the Florida Gators in the SEC. David, how you doing today?
Doing great. Ready for this national championship game tomorrow night. We'll dive into that. And, it's sad. It's last football game of the season. We look forward to it. There's things to look forward to, but it also means it's the last game of the season. So college football is on its way out.
And it also means that there's going to be plenty of time for analysis and breakdowns during the offseason and rankings and recruiting and National Signing Day to deal with. We also have Mike Loveall from Last Word on Sports on board, and we will have basically these three contributors here, and also Chad Neipling from Fox Sports Arkansas joining us, and we are looking forward to getting this started. So just mark this down as your new home for SEC football talk each and every Sunday. Mike, are you with us? Mike's having a few little issues with his internet signal, but we'll get started here and let Mike jump on board here soon. So, of course, front and center is the national championship game. Clemson, consensus number one, according to the College Football Playoff Committee, since the first rankings came out, undefeated, the only team in the country without a blemish. Alabama seems unbeatable at this point, the way they're playing. Just ask Michigan State. So let's dive right into the keys for this one. What do you think, David? What's the first thing that comes to mind when you think about Clemson going up against Alabama tomorrow night?
What game plan will Alabama probably what will they come in with? I think we got kind of surprised by the way Jake Kirker came in and played against Michigan State. It's definitely more than likely his best game he's played all year. Alabama kind of has that reputation for letting, we saw it when they rematched against LSU. They're letting their quarterbacks just kind of take over these big games. They've built their foundation on the running game, but then it comes down to it in these big games, and they kind of let the quarterbacks take over. That's definitely, Lane Kiffin definitely loves that. That's, his forte was, with the quarterback play. But I think I want to see, what game plan does Alabama come out with and try to attack that Clemson defense, and especially that defensive line.
Okay, everybody who can see Mike's Twitter handle there, you see the infamous or famous, depending on your perspective, the orange and white checkered end zone there. So we know Mike's perspective, and we know Tennessee played extremely well at Tuscaloosa. Mike, hopefully you can hear us. Your thoughts on Alabama since the Vols were able to maybe unlock some keys to coming close to the Tide?
Sure, it was like he's like a little behind.
Yeah, Mike might be on a delay here. Chime in at any point, Mike. Otherwise, we'll keep going if you can't hear us. Obviously, David, the marquee matchup in all this is Deshaun Watson against the Alabama front four and front seven.
Well, Mark, I think Alabama didn't really execute very well against Tennessee. I agree with David.
Yeah, Mike might be on a delay here.
Mark,
it's Deshaun Watson against the Alabama front four. Hey, Mike, if you could, and you'll probably hear this about 20 seconds from now, but why don't you jump out and jump back in, and we'll see if we can get synced up, and David and I will talk some Bama Tigers here. Deshaun Watson against the front seven is obviously huge in this one. I don't know that Alabama's seen a player this year. Dak Prescott would come extremely close in terms of dual threat at that efficiency level. Josh Dobbs might not be
will do, Mark.
there. he's not quite the passer that Deshaun Watson is in his development right there, even though he's a year ahead. Chad Kelly, we had mentioned and talked about him before we hit the record button. Just your thoughts about maybe Bama having that reputation for having trouble with that guy, but I don't know if this is the same Bama defense that we saw struggle against the Johnny Manziels of the world a couple of years ago.
Definitely not. And I would definitely say this defensive line, saying a lot, but this defensive line for Alabama is a lot more athletic. I mean, a lot more relative term, but these guys are fast. And SEC defensive lines are fast. The top tier teams are fast anyway, but seeing these guys run around, it really does look kind of different. And I think more importantly, this secondary is much better. They brought in Mel Tucker to help with that, and look like he's on his way to Georgia. That's some rumors that's going around now, but they brought him in to help shore up that DB. The DBs for Bama, and it was when they were playing the Manziels, and it wasn't the design play that would hurt Bama. It would be the rolling out after the first read's not there and running around like crazy and just throwing it up, and you have receivers like Mike Evans. It would be these big plays that would just somehow get over these DBs for Bama, and they've kind of shored that area up a lot in starting last year and then definitely this year. And that seems to be the main difference. They don't let that big play beat them like they did when these other mobile quarterbacks would just, run around like crazy and make plays. So that's going to be, can they contain Watson? We saw Watson against Oklahoma. They let him run loose like crazy in that first half against Oklahoma. And then he got more help in the second half. How does Clemson come out? What's their game plan? Does their game plan look much different? And it's going to be interesting to see the planned game plans that they come out with first.
This is probably the best complement of skill players that Alabama's seen this season. Certainly much different than Michigan State. That was a horrible matchup for the Spartans, not just that they were a better team, Alabama. I don't think there's any question about that, but just a really bad matchup in that Connor Cook's probably going to be a solid NFL quarterback, but he's just not going to hurt you in breaking from contain. So you rule out that issue or challenge for the Alabama defense. Then you also rule out that even though Michigan State's known for having a great ground game with the Le'Veon Bell and Jeremy Langford, they actually had the worst ground game of the four teams in the college football playoff. So basically it was going to be Connor Cook beating Alabama from the pocket, and that's it. Aaron Burbridge might be a better receiver than anybody that Clemson has, that one receiver, but if you go 4 or 5 deep at the wide receiver core, Clemson probably significantly better than Michigan State. So there's going to be more dynamic playmakers to deal with for Alabama this week than they had to face in taking on Michigan State.
Right. And you said that was a bad matchup. Not many teams are going to line up and just straight up play power football against Alabama. It's not going to happen. They're built to stop that. And we've hit it before. It's the mobile quarterbacks that give them trouble. So this is why I think this matchup is really, this is what college football is all about this year. You're going to get what Alabama has struggled with in the past versus, what Clemson does best. They don't line up I formation and try and run it down your throat. They use their quarterback's mobility, set the edges, and let the wide receivers, speed make some plays, and the running back speed make some plays. And that's why I really think this matchup is definitely the best and a good barometer of a national championship game this year.
David, Wayne Gallman's a kid that a lot of people haven't seen across the country until just in the last couple of weeks, because Clemson ran through an ACC schedule fairly easily. They had the big game against Notre Dame. They had a big game against Florida State. But other than that, a lot of the games go under the radar. They have a big lead in most of those games. Gallman, though, in the second half took a lot of pressure off Deshaun Watson. They gave him the football more. He had 26 carries for $150. And while Ezekiel Elliott and Derrick Henry and Leonard Fournette and those guys get all the pub, here's a guy in Wayne Gallman that is a pretty darn good back. I would say he's one of the 10 best backs in the country, and he's not going to slash and gash Alabama. I don't think there's any question about that. I would be shocked if he threw up a 150 number on Alabama, but he needs to at least make them respect the run. If he can have a 25 carry, it'll be really good night for Clemson if he gets to 25 carries. But if he goes 20, 25 carries and gets 80 yards, if he can just loosen up that defense just a little bit to keep the defense honest, that's going to be big.
Definitely, and I think that probably predicates on how successful Watson is running as well. If he's getting his yards, do you take the ball out of his hands? Do you take? But as you said, Gallman, he really came on that second half against Oklahoma. Like you said, he ran for $150 and had 2 touchdowns in that game. You said he's not, he's definitely not the power back that can, most SEC teams like to have. He is a little shiftier. He can make some yards out of nothing. But it is going to be interesting to see how that powerful defensive line for Bama, can they get in the backfield and not give him a lot of space to run and make moves? And how much can he help Watson, I think, is the question. If he can help, if Watson's not having to do all the running, Clemson's going to be in great shape late in the fourth quarter in this game.
Hey, Mike, are you with us? Can you hear us? Mike still might be a little bit delayed here. I believe he is. I have to also, David, be concerned a little bit about the Clemson defense. I know that they showed up, especially in the second half against Oklahoma, and it was impressive without Shaq Lawson, who's by far their best pass rusher, 23 tackles for loss this year. He's a specimen, does a great job, but he's hobbled up. But without him, they still got to Baker Mayfield, still contained him, still just made life miserable for him. But they've had games this year where they've given up 41 points to Jacoby Brissett. They gave up 37 in North Carolina to some good teams with some playmakers that run spread, that are used to scoring a lot of points, but do not have anything close to the elite athletes of the Calvin Ridley, Ardarius Stewart realm. So I think the Clemson defense might be in for a little bit of a shock. And I don't know, even though Samaje Perine, again, exceptional player, I don't know if they've tackled the likes of Derrick Henry when he comes downhill with a lot of steam going.
I think probably the closest, in terms of talent at running back they've played. They got to play FSU and Dalvin Cook, and Cook, pretty much he got his yards against Clemson. And Bama is probably going to try and line it up and run it even more, I would believe. I think the game plan of what you're saying is if Alabama, I think, is going to really come in and try and establish Derrick Henry. They let Coker run, like I said earlier, get crazy against Michigan State, and that was definitely the way to go. Michigan State's defense is strong against the run. But this game, I really think they're going to try and establish Derrick Henry. He had over 40 carries against Auburn, had over 40 carries against Florida in back-to-back games. So now do they let Henry come in and let him take over the game and keep that Clemson offense on the sideline? And that's really all going to be predicated on how well this Clemson defense plays. Can their defensive line, like they did against Oklahoma, get in the backfield and really stop Derrick Henry? Derrick Henry is going to have his chances. I really think Bama is going to probably try and give him, early in the game, give him every opportunity to see if he can sit and punish that Clemson defense. Or is it the other way around? Because Clemson against Oklahoma, not only were they strong against Oklahoma, they were punishing. They were injured. The Oklahoma guys were, especially the running backs, were getting injured in that second half of that game against Clemson Oklahoma game. Oklahoma's running backs were pretty much out of the game in the second half. So and I think the big matchup, the one-on-one matchup, I'm really excited to see is with Mackenzie Alexander, the DB from Clemson, and Ridley for Bama, because that's going that matchup there. I think the reason I'm excited for it is we get to see the scheming of Lane Kiffin, and how he gets to. We've seen it the last couple of years of how he can move Amari Cooper around and get him open no matter who's guarding, like a Vernon Hargraves. And then the SEC championship game this year, like good Florida defense where Bama really just, all in honestly, could still pass the ball against them no matter how good that DB was. And I think that's the scheming of Lane Kiffin. So I'm ready to see how Kiffin moves around and schemes to get really the ball, because that's the main that main matchup, I think, is to Jacob Coker, to his success.
Yeah, that's an exceptional point, because last week it was Sterling Shepard, Oklahoma's number one wide receiver, and Clemson wasn't going to keep their cornerbacks to each side. They were going to take Mackenzie Alexander, their best corner, one of the elite corners in the country, and shadow Sterling Shepard and keep him with Shepard. And Sterling Shepard caught 7 passes, but they really contained him. They kept him under control. They tackled him. He only had 87 yards. He made no big plays. And So Mackenzie Alexander against Calvin Ridley. Again, if you love to see elite athletes in space going against each other, that's going to be premier right there. Mike, you with us now? I think we still have quite the delay with Mike, if he's with us at all. Special teams, another thing that popped up in the Michigan State game for all the woes the Spartans had against Alabama. They didn't need a breakdown in special teams, and they had one. Cyrus Jones bringing back a kick, as he's apt to do from time to time. Clemson, if you look at the metrics, they're not very good covering punts and kickoffs. They're marginal, and Cyrus Jones can play a factor in this game as well doing that. Both kicking games are strong or solid. No issues with the place kickers or anything like that. You touched upon it off the top, David, where Nick Saban, he knows how to prepare a team for this. Although this is the first time he's under this format, prepared a team in 10 or 11 days. New territory for Dabo Swinney. I give him all the credit in the world for taking Clemson from a team that just based on really good talent would win 8 or 9 games every year to just in the last few years, they're beating programs that they haven't beaten in years. Ohio State, LSU, Oklahoma a couple times in postseason play. They're just a much different program, much tougher mindset, mentality, not wilting in the fourth quarter, not playing down to their competition. It's really incredible, very great job that Dabo Swinney has done with his team. And it shows that coaches can approach things different ways. Nick Saban, very businesslike, very serious, and kind of puts a fear of God into his players. Dabo Swinney throwing pizza parties and taking that route. And the players respond. And it's on the defensive side of the ball to see this Clemson team. And if you remember this bowl game, David, the offense with Taj Boyd, Sammy Watkins, and those guys, probably just as good. West Virginia hung 70 points on this team in the Orange Bowl like it was nothing. Like it was 70 in the third quarter, and they could have put up 100 if they wanted to. It was that bad. This Clemson defense different than that. I don't know that they're elite. I don't know that they're Alabama. I don't think so. They probably don't need to be in this game, but they need to play their best defensive effort of the season in this one.
Right. And I think it speaks a lot to Clemson, to the term Clemsoning, it's kind of changed from what it was. Like you said, it was from losing teams they weren't supposed to lose to, or finding a way to lose a game in the fourth quarter. And now, to me, if you ask what Clemsoning is, it's really all about winning. I mean, these guys have been on a 10-game win, at least winning 10 games for a few years. And, I think, coming into this season, right now, Clemson 42 freshmen and redshirt freshmen. This is a young team, and they're not going anywhere anytime soon. If you look at the recruiting rankings now, they're right up there again. So, Clemson's not going anywhere anytime soon. The ACC is going to be a Clemson FSU battle. Maybe Miami comes up with Mark Richt now, but Clemson, the ACC is going to be, decided between that Clemson FSU game. And another thing I think coming into this year, also they had to replace everyone. Their offensive linemen, all 5 starters were brand new coming into this season. And to be able to, put that together, and now you're playing for a national championship, went undefeated in the regular season, beat Oklahoma. I mean, I tell you what, yeah, Dabo Swinney, he's got Clemson running into a machine right now. And it's going to be interesting to see how they keep it up. Coming down here, I live in Florida, I see, Clemson has a footprint down here. They get a lot of athletes down here to Florida, and they go up there and play for Clemson. And tell you what, this shows on the field, the speed and Dabo Swinney's coaching, they've lost coordinators and the ball is still rolling. So tell you what, it's going to be interesting to see. There's some talk if Saban ever leaves, does Alabama maybe go after Dabo? But if he has Clemson rolling like they are now, why would you leave?
And when people bring up Clemson and Florida State, they almost talk about it like it's an extension of the SEC, and for good reason. The ACC is not to the level. I don't care what the games against each other. We can argue that another week. There's a reason why the ACC has played on even terms in terms of wins and losses with the SEC the last couple of years. It's because of the matchups. There's no comparison between these two leagues, but Clemson and Florida State would be the two schools, obviously, that could transition very nicely into the SEC and compete for championships. if Bama does what's expected here, David, they win the game. The SEC goes to 9-2. It's really hard to argue. And I thought that this was a really good argument all season. And I was just waiting for the postseason to see, okay, we got like-seeded teams from different conferences playing each other. I thought the Big Ten was very strong, especially the top 6 or 7, and especially the top 4 with Ohio State, Michigan, Iowa. The Pac-12, we know the depth of the Pac-12, even though they didn't get into the college football playoff. I certainly think the Big 12 is probably the worst of the 5, maybe the ACC. They've got quite the battle going on there. But at 9-2, and you can almost explain away your Florida Gators' rough stretch drive, I should say, under Jim McElwain in this first season, playing really, really good competition. That was an ugly loss, obviously, for the league, taking a 7-1 SEC team and losing to, I think, what was a 4th seed in the Big Ten. The Texas A&M loss can be excused to a certain extent. Not excused, it's a loss, but third-string quarterback, Murray and Allen, obviously, going elsewhere. So a tough quarterback situation at the last second to deal with Louisville in the bowl game. Other than that, it's just ringing up W's for the SEC, and again, it could go to 9-2.
And like you said, it's really all about matchups. The last week of the regular season, we had, our typical ACC versus SEC matchups where you have Florida versus Florida State, Clemson, South Carolina, Louisville, Kentucky. All those went the ACC's way. And if you think about it, those ACC teams going into the game were better than, those teams. We didn't really know what to expect from Florida, there because, that was the first of their string of losses going against Florida State. But, the ACC matched up well that last week of the season. And I would say, the SEC matched up well versus, some of their Big Ten counterparts coming into the bowl season. While it looked even, you probably would have liked to see Florida maybe versus Northwestern. Tennessee was definitely probably playing a little bit better. They were playing a little bit better at the end of the year, so you maybe would like to see them against Michigan. But, for the most part, the matchups were about as even as you can get, and the SEC has definitely come out on top of the bowl season. It's pretty – they have struggled in the bowl season the last couple of years, the SEC has, and especially in the big bowl games. So for Alabama, to win and get that, credibility – I hate to say the SEC took a hit of credibility, but, in some people's eyes they did. And the Alabama has finally, got that big win again and going back towards the national championship games. So, after last year losing against Ohio State in the inaugural playoff game.
Yeah, we got Mike still trying to come on, but having some issues there. So we'll just continue to talk about the Clemson-Alabama national championship game and also the SEC. Bring up the Big Ten playing 4 games against the SEC. Man, Tennessee-Michigan, that sounds like a good matchup. I wish they would have put those 2 teams together. That would have been a good selection right there.
Michigan State, Alabama, that Michigan defense versus Dobbs and Hurd. That would have been a smash 'em up match out there. That would have been great to see.
Oh, that would have been a really good game, I think. And making no defense or disclaimer for Michigan State in the Big Ten. They won the Big Ten. They were the 1 seed in the Big Ten. Alabama the 1 seed, and there was no competition in that game past late second quarter. Those teams kind of white knuckled and really went toe to toe for like a quarter and a half with no score. And then Ridley hit the big play, and then Connor Cook threw the pick when it looked like it was going to be a 10-7 game at half. And then obviously Alabama just completely outclassed Michigan State. I don't think that's the matchup if you want to get together the 2 most talented teams in the 2 leagues. That's obviously going to be Ohio State and Alabama. And we are not going to see that game this year. Iowa had a really good season. They get outclassed in the Rose Bowl. But the 4 Big Ten SEC matchups, of course, the SEC winning 3 of 4, and that 1 versus 1 seed, no contest, Michigan demolition on Florida. The other 2 games, Tennessee routed Northwestern. Northwestern just couldn't do anything offensively against that Tennessee defense in particular. And that's an interesting matchup. Always, it's always intriguing to me to see how Northwestern is able to survive in a league like the Big Ten, and they somehow get it done because of the style of play. But then they get hit with all that athleticism, and they can't keep up against a Tennessee in the bowl game, despite being a 10-2 team. And then let's see the other matchup. I'm losing track. Oh, Penn State and Georgia. Hackenberg got knocked out in the first quarter. Georgia outplayed them, had a nice lead. Penn State made a furious comeback. It got to a one-score game, but Georgia, a little bit better team on that day. So that was a decent matchup, pretty fair matchup there as well, talking SEC and Big Ten. So, again, want to remind everyone who catches this replay that this is SEC Breakdown. We're going to come your way at this point every Sunday at 4 o'clock Eastern, 3 o'clock Central Time with a group that we got together here that we feel very good about talking SEC football each and every week. So that's David Waters, and it's also in future weeks going to be Chad Neipling from Fox Sports Arkansas, and also Mike Loveall from Last Word on Sports. They both very entrenched in SEC football as we are just about 3 weeks away from National Signing Day. And believe me, we will dive into it in a big way here in the next few weeks. David, you got a pick for us on Alabama-Clemson.
Well, I keep going back and forth. This is a show.
You're going back and forth really on this.
I really am. I just, we keep bringing it up that, I think this is still the type of offense that really can give Nick Saban trouble. Kirby Smart's on his way out to Georgia. All seems to be okay. His head is in the game, but there could be some, some points there to where he's not solely thinking about the national championship game. But in the end, I really do think it's Bama who somehow finds a way. I think Saban in this national championship game, his coaching is top notch, and I think he gets another one. I think it's Alabama's now counting. This would be 16 national championships for him, but there's many numbers out there floating around of how many titles they have. So I think they're calling it the road to 16. So I'll go with 16. But I think in the end, I think Alabama, I'll tell you, is 27-20 over Clemson. But I think it's going to be a great game. Not to take anything away from Clemson. It's just I think Alabama finds a way to win it. And hopefully the ratings. I know we will hit on that, but hopefully the ratings were much better than they were for the New Year's Eve game.
Yeah, let's. We can wrap up with that. I'll give my pick real quick here. So I think it's not going to be quite a classic game, not a great game, a very good game, maybe a one-score game at halftime, and then Alabama is going to stretch the lead in the third and fourth quarters. I just think it's going to be extremely difficult for Clemson to score the kind of points that they need to score to offset not having a great defense. They have a ton of talent and NFL players on defense, but they don't have a lockdown defense like Alabama has. Jay Coker, people seem to continue to ignore it week to week, but he's a very efficient quarterback. He went 25 for 30 against Michigan State, and he's been generally playing like this for the last 6 or 7 weeks of the season. I think he's going to be efficient, do the things he needs to do. He breaks contain, and he's actually a threat. He's not going to wow you with his speed and agility, but he breaks tackles, and he's got some moves in the open field, so they're going to have to look out for that. I just think, Derrick Henry's going to lean on that defense, and that offensive line is just going to wear them down in the third and fourth quarter. I like Alabama pulling away in this one, 34-17. So just to get everybody caught up in the situation in regards to the college football playoff format and how it works in regards to television, is that between the College Football Playoff Committee, ESPN, and the bowls that are assigned to these games, it obviously worked out this year in its second year that the New Year's Eve games were the College Football Playoff games. And then on New Year's Day, the Rose Bowl and the Sugar Bowl are tied to those time slots. They're not budging. They're not moving. So on New Year's Day, you've got the Rose Bowl kicking off around 5 o'clock and the Sugar Bowl at 8 o'clock. It creates a situation where you've got the two most important football games of the year on New Year's Eve, and people are going out. They've got plans. They have things that they typically do, obviously, for the holiday, and it's a fight between football and other activity. And what it meant was the two playoff games we had last year at the Rose Bowl and at the Sugar Bowl with Ohio State, Alabama, and Oregon, Florida State had enormous ratings, pushing a 16, which means 16% of all the households in America were watching those games, and more like 40%, 45% of the TVs that were on were watching those college football playoff games. That relates to, I think, about 2.5 people per household. It's like, high 30 millions, 35, 38 million people watching those games versus 9.7, 9.9. You're talking about a 35 to 40% drop in TV ratings. So you're talking about more like 20 or 22 million people watching these games. And that does not bode well for advertising dollars and just the health of college football when you're not setting up these games for the fringe fan. It's not me who's going to watch the Foster Farms Bowl, and watch everything in between. David and I trying to watch everything possible. These are fringe football fans that want to see the biggest games and the best times. But hey, if it gets in the way and there's something else going on, they're not going to watch. And that's all there is. On top of that, we had 2 lousy games, especially the entirety or most of the entirety of what was supposed to be the big game, because they put it in the 8:00 slot, the Alabama-Michigan State game. So, David, your thoughts about this quandary for ESPN and for the bowls?
I think what gets me more than anything is the stubbornness of the playoff committee and Bill Hancock. ESPN told them, look, they tried to get them to move it off of New Year's Eve. They warned them this could happen. And, even I said it when I first saw, college football on New Year's Eve. Look, I know I was going to try my hardest to watch the games. Luckily, I have a baby at home. We really weren't going to do much anyway. I could watch the games. But, if, younger people who, college football is structured, of course, your households are 18 to 49. That's the demographic that everybody wants to hit. New Year's Eve, they want to go out. And I think the stubbornness of what's getting me, Bill Hancock, his quote, 1 year does not make a trend. We are not making decisions based on TV numbers. I get that, and I would most of the time agree. But when everybody in the world told you this was probably going to happen, and it did happen, now you're just being stubborn. And, I get the Rose Bowl has to be in its time slot and the Sugar Bowl in its time slot with these contracts. But they really need to take a look at these college football as a whole, and not just the Rose Bowl, not just, the Sugar Bowl. I mean, in the Rose Bowl, look, I get it. I mean, I'm a Southern guy. You're being Midwest and this Pac-12 fans. Look, I get it. It's a big traditional game.
Yes, we love the Rose Bowl.
It's just, you do, and I get it. It's just being from the South. It's not that big of a deal here. The tradition is, but I think when it comes to this, and it comes to the college football playoff, and I think, I speak for a lot. I just really want the best for college football. It's my passion. It's what I'm passionate about. And, I want to see, it's not ever going to be as big as the Super Bowl, but I'd love for it to, get there and get close to it. And these games on New Year's Eve, if that's going to be the case, it's never going to happen. It's never, ever going to get close to, the NFL and the Super Bowl.
David, do you want to hear my remedy for this year and for next year? This is how I would have scheduled. Okay, I understand the Rose Bowl stubborn, the Sugar Bowl stubborn. Let them be stubborn. Move all those games off of January 2nd on Saturday and move them to New Year's Eve. Okay, if you're a college football fan and you realize the way the games and the bowls have been structured in the past, before the college football playoff, when there was just the BCS, most of the games on New Year's Eve were decent bowl games, not great bowl games during the day. You had the Liberty Bowl was often played in a number of other bowl games. And then late night was the Peach Bowl. Usually the ACC and the SEC played a Peach Bowl game, Chick-fil-A bowl game late. Take those January 2nd games, which were like okay games during the day, and then they were better matchups at night, TCU, Oregon, and the Alamo Bowl, Penn State, Georgia. Take those and play those December 31st. Then you still play the Rose Bowl and the Sugar Bowl, preceded by the Fiesta Bowl, a really good lineup on New Year's Day, a traditional lineup. Play the college football playoff games on Saturday the 2nd. People are used to the games becoming more important as you go, and it's kind of odd to play these two mammoth games, these playoff games. Then the next day, it kind of takes the shine off the Rose, the Fiesta, and the Sugar. And then on January 2nd, sure, again, I'm watching because I love college football, but all of a sudden you just have these random bowl games that are just kind of layover games and just kind of hangers on. Well, those should have been played before. You've got a natural progression of decent bowl games, big bowl games, Rose, Sugar, and then the playoff on Saturday, and you're all set. I think that's pretty easy. And then even next year, when the Rose and the Sugar are still out of the playoff, I believe it goes to the Peach and the Fiesta next year, I believe, are the two playoff games.
Yes.
Why not this? I think I had this worked out where you could keep the rows in place, maybe play a playoff. Maybe you could, I had this worked out in my head how we could work this out and keep the rows and sugar in place. The other thing that's going to pop up here in a couple of years, it's only going to be a year or two. It's going to run into Sunday and going to run into the NFL. And nobody's gonna touch the NFL, and that's been the past in college football. Where even if the rows and sugar are so tied to New Year's Day at that time, they're not tied to it when it hits on Sunday. They play January 2nd. So
exactly, if they can move off those days so they don't compete with the NFL, then what's stopping them from moving? And helping the overall playoff. That's my whole point. Yeah, I get your tradition, and I get there's been contracts made. But we hear it all the time. Contracts are made to be amended or broken. There's enough money there. I mean, look, I think I heard the quote, ESPN has to make $20 million in make goods, for these advertisers that these ratings didn't provide for them in the college football playoffs.
It's not good for my bonus, David.
I hear you. Yeah. So, something has to happen, but ESPN's not going to want this. And like I said, ESPN went to the College Football Playoff Committee first and warned them about this. And now ESPN is losing money. So, they're not happy. They gave a warning, and now they're having to pay make goods or pay out money, however they're going to settle it. That's, not for me to figure out, of course. But, what's going to happen? Because it can't happen year after year. And they say, 1 year does not make a trend, but when everybody warned you and it happened, that something different is going to have to come about and definitely help these playoff ratings.
Yeah, and from a television standpoint, this is a once a year deal. It's not like you had a bad first weekend of NBA games and you can make up for it later. This is, again, if you've got to give back the money, you got to give back the money, and you've got no events the rest of the year. These do better than Monday Night Football. That at least they did last year. They did much better than Monday.
Yeah.
But those ratings were basically Monday Night Football ratings. The Monday Night Football games usually do about a 9.5, and that's what the college football playoff games did with Michigan State, Alabama, Oklahoma, Clemson. So interesting discussion, David. Hopefully we can jump on board next week, and we will, with Chad Neipling, Fox Sports Arkansas, and also Mike Loveall from Last Word on Sports. For those of you who have hung on throughout, I guess we've had 21 viewers at one point or another during our launch here. So good stuff there. Join us each and every Sunday, 4 o'clock Eastern Time, 3 o'clock Central Time, SEC Breakdown. We bring on the best bloggers and broadcasters to cover SEC football. David, this is the beginning of good stuff. So thanks for jumping on, and we'll see you next week.
All right. See you later.